authority. In short, it is also called the authority or central authority, or even its abbreviation CCP. It is established for a large number of purposes, but first, let me quickly just tell you the administrative provisions of this authority. The administrative provisions of this authority are that the authority will have its headquarters at the NCR region, Delhi, and it can have regional offices wherever it wants in India. The authority will consist of a chief commissioner who is the boss and other commissioners who are subordinate to him. The authority shall also have an investigation wing. This investigation wing will be headed by a director general, and there can be other directors subordinate to the director general of this investigation wing. The job of this investigation wing is to conduct inquiry and investigation as directed by this authority. The investigation wing is answerable to the authority, and the authority itself is answerable to the central government, that is the Consumer Ministry. Now, coming back to the functions of this central authority. Under the old act, one had to approach the consumer courts for relief. But under this new act, this new authority has been set up. This authority is established to regulate matters which are prejudicial to interests of the public and consumers. It is established to promote, protect, and enforce rights of consumers as a class. And it is established to prevent the violation of consumer rights, to prevent unfair trade practice, and to prevent advertisements which are false or misleading. So the primary functions of the authority is to look into complaints. But the authority, being a regulator, also has some secondary functions. The authority shall promote research in the field of consumer rights. The authority shall spread awareness. The authority shall encourage NGOs to cooperate and to work with consumer protection agencies. And the authority shall also advise the central and state consumer ministries for welfare measures in the consumer field. So how does this authority deal with complaints? The authority is empowered to receive complaints from citizens even in electronic mode. The authority can direct investigation either when a complaint is made by a citizen, or if there are directions from the government, or the authority can initiate investigation even suo motu, where the authority itself suspects any kind of wrongdoing. So it can begin investigation. And after investigation, it can pass certain types of orders to punish the wrongdoers. Now, these orders which the authority can pass are not at all weak or toothless orders. And the grounds for passing these orders is simply that the authority must be satisfied to impose the penalty, or where it deems necessary, which is practically the same thing. There are Section 20 orders. Section 20 orders are to deal with violation of consumer rights and unfair trade practices, whereas Section 21 orders are to deal with false and misleading advertisements. Section 20 orders seem to be of a very wide range. Section 20 says that the central authority may pass such order as may be necessary. So a Section 20 order is practically a very wide power to pass any order that the authority thinks will remedy the wrongdoing. Section 20 orders can also include directions for recall of goods which are dangerous, for reimbursement of money to the consumer, and to discontinue practices which are unfair and prejudicial to the consumer. Now, Section 21 orders. Section 21 provides for 4 types of punishments or penalties which are given from subsections 1 to subsection 4 of Section 21. The difference between the 4 types of orders under Section 21 is not only the type of penalty that is different, but also to whom that penalty shall apply to. So the types of orders, for example, are that the authority can, pending investigation, impose a penalty up to 10 lakhs, and on top of that, if anyone contravenes this, if they do not comply with it, then a contravention penalty, an additional penalty will be attracted, which can go up to 50 lakhs. The authority can, again, pending investigation, it can say that you need to discontinue your advertisement for up to 1 year, and similar contravention penalty is that if you don't comply with it, then the penalty goes up to 3 years, that you stop your advertisement from 1 year, you contravene, it can go up to 3 years to discontinue that advertisement. After investigation is finished, the authority can say that you need to either modify or discontinue your advertisement. And after investigation, the authority can say that you need to pay a penalty which can go up to 10 lakh rupees. These penalties can be applicable to the trader, manufacturer, endorser, advertiser, publisher, or any person as is mentioned in the respective subsections of section 21. So one may kindly look into the section 21 to see to whom the particular penalty applies in the respective subsection. Now section 21 orders have certain considerations. The authority has to take certain considerations to determine the penalty. Specifically, to pass a section 21 order which punishes a false or misleading advertisement, the authority has to consider the size of the population that is affected by this false or misleading advertisement. The authority will determine what was the vulnerability of that population, what was the frequency and duration of this offense, and what was the gross revenue that was earned by the wrongdoer using the false and misleading advertisement. To pass section 20 and section 21 orders, the wrongdoer must be given an opportunity to be heard, and orders cannot be passed by the authority without hearing the other side, that is, without hearing the wrongdoers or the alleged wrongdoers. The persons upon whom the penalties are levied can take certain defenses under certain circumstances. For example, they can say that the precautions were taken by them to ensure the correctness of the advertisement, or they can say that they had no earlier knowledge of the order of the authority. If authority has in advance, if the authority has told them that please discontinue doing so and so, one of the ground of defense is that they have not been communicated that order. The orders that have been passed, these section 20 and 21 orders that have been passed by the National Commission, that have been passed by the central authority, can be challenged by any aggrieved person within 30 days to the National Commission. If these orders are not complied with, the central authority can complain to the competent authority, which is a magistrate, for the enforcement of section 20 and 21 orders. And the magistrate can further penalize for non-compliance, meaning that certain penalty has been imposed upon someone by the authority that has not been complied with by that wrongdoer, and so the authority complains to the magistrate, and the magistrate can further penalize with imprisonment up to 6 months or a fine up to 20 lakhs in addition to the other penalties imposed. It is worth noting that for investigation, this authority through its investigation wing has the power to call upon the lawbreaker to produce any document or article in his possession, and the law of criminal procedure code will apply for the search and seizure. And in addition to that, within 21 days of making the seizure, the authority and the investigation wing have to make copies of all the items that are seized, and then they have to return the items that they had seized. And the copies that they make have to be certified by the person from whom they are seized. To prevent abuse of this search and seizure power, Parliament has enacted a vexatious search provision that if the investigation wing conducts a search and seizure, despite knowing that there is no reasonable ground for conducting it, then the officer who conducts the search and seizure becomes liable to a punishment, which is imprisonment up to 1 year or a fine up to rupees 10,000 or both. So this is a safeguard against the abuse of search and seizure power during investigation. Now you may be wondering, what is the difference between this consumer authority and the consumer court? The key difference between the authority and the consumer courts is that the authority is for consumers as a class. So if you have a private one-on-one dispute and you want compensation, or if you want some kind of specific relief, then you will have to go to the consumer courts. The authority's main job is to do inquiry and investigation and to ensure that wrongdoers are penalized for consumers as a class. But you cannot get compensation or private reliefs, like you want to remove defects in your particular goods, or if you want to remove the deficiencies. So that is the key difference between the authority and the consumer courts. So having said that, the discussion on central authority is over, and before we move on to the consumer courts, let me quickly discuss the provisions relating to the district collector. The district collector is roped in to receive complaints. The district collector may be by whatever name called in whatever district in the whole of India. The district collector is authorized to receive complaints from citizens even electronically, just like the authority. And the district collector is also authorized to carry out inquiry and investigation within his jurisdiction where there are matters relating to the consumer matter. And if he carries out investigation, if the district collector carries out his inquiry and investigation in his jurisdiction, he will submit his report to the central authority. And even vice versa, the authority can tell the collector to carry out an inquiry and investigation. And just like the authority, even the collector can call upon the lawbreaker to produce any document or article in his possession. Now, let us discuss the consumer courts. There are 3 tiers or 3 levels of the consumer courts. That is the district, state, and national. And they can have regional benches. The consumer commissions will have a president and it will have members. However, it is worth noting that even members of even the district commission are to be appointed by the central government. Each level of the consumer court has its pecuniary jurisdiction thresholds, but the central government can provide for any different values. The pecuniary jurisdiction will be calculated and determined only as per the consideration value that is paid. Under the old act, it was a formula that your X plus Y has to equal to 20 lakhs. So under the old act, your district forum complaint had to be goods plus compensation should not exceed 20 lakhs. But under this new act, the plus compensation aspect is removed. Under the new act, it is only the consideration value, that also which is paid, that will determine the pecuniary jurisdiction of any consumer court under the new act. So now for the district commission, your consideration paid has to be below 1 crore. State commission complaint has to be between 1 crore and 10 crores. And national commission complaints only when the consideration paid is above 10 crores. Now it is worth noting that there is a new concept of unfair contracts in this new Consumer Act. The term unfair contract is defined as a contract having terms which cause significant change in the rights of a consumer. And it is a very inclusive definition. So if unreasonable money or obligations are imposed, that is unfair contract. If there is unilateral termination, that is unfair contract. If there is a disproportionate penalty for breach, for example, if I default, I will pay 9%, but if you default, you will pay 24%. So disproportionate penalty for breach, that is unfair contract. It is a very inclusive definition. Only the state commission and the national commission have the power to hear complaints about unfair contracts, to hear complaints that some clauses of the contract need to be declared as unfair. The district commission does not have the power to hear matters about unfair contracts, and the state commission can hear it from 0 rupees to 10 crore rupees value. The terms which are declared as unfair clauses or terms which are declared in that unfair contract shall be null and void. It is only the terms which are unfair which will be null and void, not the whole of the contract itself. Now, coming to filing a consumer complaint, you have to show that you are a consumer. You have to show that you are not for a commercial purpose. You have to show that you are not a personal service, and you have to show that it was not a free service. The issues that you must face for approaching the consumer courts are that there must be a deficiency in service, there must be a restrictive trade practice, there must be some unfair trade practice, there must be the defect in goods, the goods may be spurious goods or adulterants, that there is an unfair contract can be one of the reasons, that you have suffered a harm or injury, you can approach the consumer court, that the advertisement is misleading, or that there is a violation of consumer rights. So if any of these have happened, you can come to the consumer court. You must file your consumer complaint within 2 years from the date on which your grievance arose. And beyond that, you have to show a reason why it took longer than 2 years. The consumer courts can give reliefs, like it can direct the opposite party to remove the defect, to replace the goods, to return the price along with interest, to grant compensation, to discontinue the unfair or restrictive trade practice, to withdraw and to tell not to sell the hazardous or unsafe goods, to cease manufacture of hazardous goods, to stop the misleading advertisement, and to issue corrective advertisement. These are the reliefs which the Consumer Court can grant. This new Consumer Protection Act, it introduces a new groundbreaking provision that the consumer complaint can even be filed in the territorial jurisdiction where the complainant resides, which is drastically different, not just from the old act, but is also drastically different from general principles of law. The new act introduces another groundbreaking provision about deemed admission of complaints, that from the date of filing, if your complaint is not admitted within 21 days, your complaint will be deemed to be admitted and you can issue notice or summons to the opposite party. The opposite party then has 30 plus 15 days, total of 45 days to reply, failing which it will be an ex parte complaint. Complaints have to be decided within 3 months by the Consumer Court if a laboratory is not involved, and 5 months if the laboratory is involved. No adjournment shall ordinarily be given unless there is sufficient cause, and reasons for this adjournment have to be recorded, and even costs can be imposed for seeking adjournment. And the courts can grant interim orders during the pendency if the court sees it necessary. Now let us discuss appeals. Under the new act, each consumer court can review its own order within 30 days, either on its own motion or an application made by either party. The only requirement is that there should be an error which is apparent in the order. Next, coming to appeal. If you want to appeal orders or judgments, you have to deposit 50% of the amount if you have to pay anything under that order. The district commission complaint, if you want to appeal to the state commission, that you have made a complaint in the district commission, an order has been passed, and if you want to challenge it to the state commission, that time limit is 45 days for appeal, and all other appeals under the act are 30 days, supposed to be made within 30 days. Now, suppose you went from district commission complaint to state commission in appeal, you can after that appeal from state commission to national only on point of law, not otherwise. So I'll just repeat that your complaint was of a district commission complaint, an order or judgment was passed, you challenged to state commission, and from state if you want to go to national, where your original was the district consumer complaint, then from state to national can be gone only on the point of law. Apart from that, state commission complaints can go to national commission in appeal, and national commission complaints can go to Supreme Court in appeal. While hearing appeals, if the appellant has not pleaded any ground in writing in the memorandum, and if he wants to rely on any such ground which is not pleaded, he first has to take permission of the court. But if the appeal court wants to consider points which are outside of the grounds pleaded, which are outside the memorandum of appeal, then yes, the court has the power. The court is not bound by the pleadings that are made in writing. The court can consider any and all points that it seems fit. If the parties are absent in the hearings of the appeals, the appeal court can proceed ex parte. Consumer courts have to finish hearing appeals within 90 days. All the three commissions, similar to the authority, can direct any person to produce anything. And if there is a risk or if there is an anticipation of a decay or destruction that someone is doing a malified act or destroying evidence, then just like the central authority, even the consumer courts have the power to direct search and seizure. After search and seizure, the consumer courts can then choose to retain or confiscate what has been seized, or it can choose to return it back from whom it was seized. There are also provisions for civil and criminal execution for the enforcement of orders. There is also a provision where the president of the National Commission can enable filing of the consumer complaints electronically. There is also a provision for video conferencing for examination of parties. The central authority and only the state and national commission, not district, can engage experts and professionals to seek their assistance in the discharge of these duties. And just like the central authority, the national commission can also lay down adequate standards for better protection of interests of consumers. There are some topics which are under the act which are not strictly relevant for housing, but nonetheless I will go over it in short. Specifically, there is product liability and there is adulterants and spurious goods. Product liability action is a new concept introduced under this Consumer Protection Act. Product liability action means a complaint filed in any of the consumer courts for compensation that is caused by harm. When harm is caused by a product, when some kind of injury or harm is caused by a product or by a service relating to any product, then that you can move a product liability action. Product liability action can be brought against three kinds of people. There is the product manufacturer, there is the product seller, and there is the product service seller. The new act sets out certain scenarios when those persons are liable, and it also sets out certain scenarios when those persons are not liable. That is, when they can take certain defenses. For example, a product manufacturer is not liable for such a danger which is obvious and commonly known, which the user ought to have known because of the characteristics of the product. For example, flammability of firecrackers. And on the other hand, another example is that the product seller is responsible for the manufacturer if the manufacturer is unknown or untraceable, or if the manufacturer is not subject to Indian law. In these cases, if the product causes harm and if the manufacturer is not reachable, then the product seller can be made liable in his behalf. Now let us discuss the provisions about adulterants and spurious goods. Separate punishments have been given where the goods are adulterants or spurious goods. For adulterants and spurious goods, the penalty that is prescribed is corresponding to the harm or injury that the consumer has suffered. Where there is zero hurt, where there is simple hurt, where there is grievous hurt, and when there is death. So there are different slabs depending on how much injury has been caused. So I'll just repeat: where there is no hurt, where there is simple hurt, where there is grievous hurt, or where there is death. The maximum punishment in the case of death is fine up to rupees 10 lakhs or and imprisonment up to 7 years. Not or both. Both can be levied. And the offenses in the grievous hurt and death are non-compensable. Now let us discuss mediation. Mediation is the process by which a mediator mediates the consumer dispute. The consumer courts can refer matters for mediation if both the parties consent to it. However, there are certain restrictions. Certain matters cannot be sent for mediation. Medical negligence is kept outside the ambit of mediation if there is a grievous injury or death. And matters involving fraud or coercion, as can be the case with property consumer disputes. If there is fraud and coercion, you cannot mediate that consumer complaint or that dispute. Each consumer court shall have a mediation cell, and there shall also be a panel of mediators. When the mediators are about to be appointed for mediating any matters, they have to disclose whether they have any financial, professional, or any kind of interest in the outcome of that dispute. And if there is any interest, if any parties want to replace the mediators, they can simply apply to the court for a different mediator. The mediator's procedure will be guided according to natural justice. And where the settlement is arrived at, or even when no settlement is arrived at, a report will be written by the mediator, which has to be signed by the parties, and it will then be forwarded back to the judge, back to the consumer court. There is also a provision in mediation that if some part of the dispute is settled, is mediated, then that much is settled. And whatever part was not settled, you can continue fighting that out in court. So whatever is settled is settled. Whatever is not getting settled, continue fighting out in court. There is no rigidity about the mediation process. Any matter that has been successfully mediated cannot be appealed, but there seems to be some kind of drafting error in the act, because this provision of not allowing an appeal from a settled mediation, this provision does not appear in state or national commission. The act only provides that the district commission mediated matters cannot be appealed. So we will have to see whether the non-appealability of settled matters, does that even apply to state and national commission, which it should. The most important thing to remember about mediation, and this is very, very important, is that when the mediation is ongoing, the parties shall not initiate any arbitral or judicial proceeding in respect of the matters that are being mediated. So if anything is the subject matter of the mediation, there is a express bar on pursuing the matter in any other judicial platform. And another thing to remember about mediation is that if a settlement is arrived at and subsequent to that settlement, if any of the parties pass away, then the parties are not discharged merely by the death of any of the parties. The legal heirs can press for enforcing the settlement. However, if the right to claim that action expires with the person, for example, that the settlement was that someone, the doctor will do surgery on someone, but the patient itself has passed away, then there is no need to enforce upon that. But where the right to pursue the action survives even after death, then yes, that survives and the legal heirs can take it up despite any of the parties having passed away after the settlement is arrived. Now, coming to the topic of e-commerce. First of all, another groundbreaking provision in this Consumer Protection Act is that the consumer courts can require an electronic service provider to provide any information, documents, and records which the consumer court wants. An electronic service provider is anyone who provides technologies to enable someone to make a sale. So, for example, if there is a Facebook advertisement, Facebook can be called, or even Amazon in a similar scenario. And sometimes, in fact, many times, we see that sellers have their own website. And if we scroll down to the bottom of the website, we see a small message that the website is either made or it is managed by some kind of company that does computer programming and coding. And even they can be called as electronic service provider. They can be called in the consumer courts if the consumer courts so desire, if the consumer courts want any kind of data from these electronic service providers. But what I just said, that is in the consumer court when the fight has begun. When it comes to the provisions of e-commerce under the new act, a lot of things are there even before there is any kind of dispute, even before the consumer court comes into the picture. The new act provides that an e-commerce entity shall either be a marketplace e-commerce entity or an inventory e-commerce entity. The difference is very simple. Suppose I am Nike shoes, and if I sell my Nike shoes on Amazon website, Amazon is a marketplace e-commerce entity. But if I sell my Nike shoes on my own Nike website, then Nike is the inventory e-commerce entity. Even if you are neither marketplace nor inventory e-commerce, you can still simply be an e-commerce entity. So suppose there is a website, and according to my interpretation, even if sale is not made on that particular website, even if sale is made offline, even the website is an e-commerce entity, even though the sale has not been made on the particular website. And the central government, in its wisdom, have drafted the rules as such that not just websites, even mobile applications and even messages, according to my interpretation, will be counted as e-commerce platforms. So if there's any e-commerce on an app or even messages, then that will be coming in the ambit of e-commerce. E-commerce rules apply to almost every activity of e-commerce, whether the sale is carried out on the internet or not. Sale can even be offline, but if wrongdoing was on website, then there are rights of the consumer. E-commerce rules shall apply to all goods and services bought and sold over a digital electronic network. E-commerce rules shall apply to all electronic products. E-commerce rules shall apply to all models of e-commerce. And lastly, and the most vastly, e-commerce rules apply to all forms of unfair trade practices across all models of e-commerce. So the ambit is kept very vast. So all these four entities, namely that the e-commerce entity, marketplace e-commerce, inventory e-commerce, and even sellers on the marketplace e-commerce, they all have to make certain kinds of disclosures. The shortest way to encompass what these disclosures and duties are is to, if you think that a consumer or you are entitled to a 99% chances there that yes, the rules expressly provide you those rights under the e-commerce rule. For example, the e-commerce rules make it compulsory for these e-commerce entities to establish a grievance redressal mechanism, the rules make it compulsory that these e-commerce entities, if you have some customer complaint and if you contact the customer care, the rules make it compulsory that within 48 hours, the e-commerce entity has to acknowledge your complaint within 48 hours, and within 1 month, they have to redress your customer complaint. If, I'm sorry, the e-commerce entities also have to compulsorily disclose in a clear and accessible manner their particular details, like what is their legal name, what is the address not only of the headquarters but also of all the branches, and what are the contact details of the customer care grievance officer who has to compulsorily be appointed. Other examples of duties under e-commerce rules are that if the goods are imported goods, you have to mention the name of the importer. If the goods have certain formalities like FSSAI, the FSSAI license, or gold authenticity certificates in case of gold, then all that has to be disclosed and made available on your e-commerce platform. The Consumer Ministry has a non-judicial settlement mechanism existing under even the old act called the National Consumer Helpline, where if people are aggrieved, then they can approach the helpline and the ministry tries to sort it out. So these new e-commerce rules tell the e-commerce entities that you should assist and cooperate and try to do partnership with these government entities that try to resolve and mediate the consumer grievances. Another example of what rights are given to consumers is that e-commerce entities can charge a cancellation cost only if the e-commerce entity has borne that cost. Only if that e-commerce entity is charged some kind of cancellation, then only it can pass on that charge to the consumer. The e-commerce entity cannot levy an arbitrary cancellation charge. Another right of the consumer which is expressly provided for in the e-commerce rules is that if there are any tick boxes, the check boxes, they should not be pre-ticked. So consent of the consumer has to come through the consumer. There cannot be any kind of automatic consent concept. They cannot be pre-tick mark check boxes. Another example of right of consumer under e-commerce is that requests for refunds have to be processed as per the RBI guidelines or as per the guidelines of any other competent authority. These e-commerce websites cannot manipulate the price of goods or services to gain unreasonable profit. For example, websites or retailers will hike up the price and then they will apply discount, especially during some kind of sale events or sale season. So that practice is stopped. You cannot just hike up the price of your product and then offer discount, which used to happen, and it is expressly sought to be controlled by the e-commerce rules. Then e-commerce entities cannot discriminate between consumers and cannot make arbitrary classification of consumers. The consumer under the e-commerce rules is also entitled to know the feedback of the products, and he can even ask the grievance officer, the customer care helpline, for the same. If there are vendors on Amazon, and another example is that if there are apps on Google Play, the consumer can even request and contact details of who is the seller on Amazon or who is the details of who is providing the app. Consumers shall in detail be informed about the request for refund, exchange, repair, warranty, guarantee, shipment, and deliveries. These are expressly required to be mentioned and clarified on the website, on the platform. And another example is that if there is some kind of rating system, 1-star or 5-star, the entity, the e-commerce entity, has to disclose the parameters for how they are determining such a rating. They have to disclose these parameters. So in short, when it comes to e-commerce, if you think you are entitled to it, chances are yes, you will be right. So e-commerce was the last topic that I was going to tackle. To conclude, let me just say that almost all definitions under the Consumer Protection Act are inclusive definitions. So the range and ambit is kept very, very vast. There are a wide range of wrongdoings that are sought to be covered and controlled by this act. And lastly, it is a welfare legislation. So with that, I think I have given a summary of all the important provisions of the act, and I don't have anything more to add to my lecture right now. I may kindly pass the floor back to the hosts, and if we have any questions, then we can tackle. Aslam ji, the floor is back to you. everything that I had to, the lecture that I had prepared, I have covered the provisions of the act. Floor back to you, Aslam.
Okay, thank you so much, Mithilji. It was very, very informative, and I'm sure everyone will benefit out of your talk. Hiralji, will you take over for the question answer session, please? Hiralji, can you unmute yourself and
hello, friends.
yes,
Mithil has very lucidly analyzed the provisions of the new law. Thanks, Mithil, for a very good analysis. He has aptly dealt with product liability also. And therefore, as I promised you, 2 issues I was to cover additionally. I'll avoid covering product liability because he has very much in detail attended to that. But very important aspect which he has not touched upon. And almost all of us, including our president, doctor, may be interested the consequences of not including medical health services in the list of services covered under the provisions of this law. Friends, because we have a little time, I may take maybe 5-10 minutes. Otherwise, it was to be covered within 1 or 2 minutes. Right, Aslam bhai?
yes, yes. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So, what is the history behind this? Now, let me tell you very initially the definition of service is almost similar except 1 or 2 changes under the 86 law and the 2019 law. Except I told you 1 or 2 corrections somewhere, changes somewhere. However, when the bill was presented to the parliament, the list of services included the healthcare services. Subsequently, on representations of the medical fraternity as well as the medical association, political pressure, blah, blah, the entry of medical healthcare were deleted from the list of services covered under the present new enactment. Friends, there can be different views about even after deletion of this entry, the big question remains whether in spite of the deletion, the healthcare services will be included or not. And therefore, I would go little deep into it about the history of this particular deletion and inclusion and all these things. Friends, even in the original 1986 law, the service list did not include the medical services. In spite of that, the Supreme Court, in case of Indian Medical Association versus VP Santa, has held that the medical services are very much included in the CP Act 1986. Let me repeat. The list of healthcare under the old legislation was also not including this particular service. In spite of that, the Supreme Court held in that particular case, in VP Santa's case, that the medical services are very much within the purview of the provision. Another question arises for the purpose of argument in the court that the parliament having specifically deleted the entry from the list of services, it may be argued that the parliament intended not to include these services. But friends, in my own view, let me tell you, this particular argument may not be sustainable for the simple reason that even in the original 1986 law also, the entry was not there. Even though the parliament has a power to undo the effect of any Supreme Court legislation, and we have seen in the past, say for example, in Shah Banu case, the parliament has overturned the Supreme Court judgment very much. But in this particular case, I am of firm view that if argued, the medical services will definitely be within the purview of the provisions of this law. and simply because the entry is deleted will not come to the help of the medical associations and medical fraternity. Because as Mithil has rightly concluded by using the word beneficial legislation he has used, and rightly so. And therefore, when there is a beneficial legislation, the interpretation is by and large in favor of the consumers or the subjects covered by that legislation. Friends, a lot of things have been said about the, the impact of this legislation, but I am more than sure that it's a good legislation, very much uh, beneficial to the citizens. But we have been facing two issues by and large. One is infrastructure issue and another is work culture of our people, including the courts and legislators and all these things. Not legislators, courts and the citizens, complainant and the other side also. As far as the infrastructure is concerned, it seems the government seems to be a little bit proactive and willing. So that may be solved in a course of time. How the work culture will take a lot of time, and therefore the benefit of this beneficial legislation, to what extent will be able to benefit it, within how much period is a mixed question. Let us hope for the best and look forward to the good benefit of the legislation. Thank you, friends. Thanks a lot. Aslam bhai, take over.
Okay, there are some questions coming up for Mithil ji. Mithil ji, Mohan Iyer wants to know where can we get copy of the new act?
Soft copy is available on Google also. You simply type the name of the law, the Consumer Protection Act 2019, you will get it. And the gentleman, even on private chat, I replied to him, he is asking for physical, where can we get the physical copy of the act, the book.
Right.
So any law bookstore near any courts, any in fort or near any court, there are law bookstores. So hard copy can be purchased from there, but considering COVID, I'm not sure that is a good idea. So online copy is very much sufficient.
Okay. Another question is from Hariram ji. He's asking,
Yes.
can the complaints not be made to State Minister for Consumer Affairs or Central Minister for Consumer Affairs because the central authority is established?
So letters can be CC'd to the ministry. There is no restriction to do so, but action will be taken only by the authority. So please send the complaint to the authority as well. Don't forget to send it to the authority. That is more important. If you want, you can CC it to the ministry. No problem.
Yeah, there are questions about whether we can get a copy of this today's webinar. Yes, what we will do is by tomorrow morning we will be putting up the edited version of this seminar on our YouTube channel, and our YouTube channel is I'll just give the address of the YouTube channel in a minute. Yes, I have kept in the chat mode. It's www.tinyurl.com/YTRCBW. This is a YouTube channel. By tomorrow morning, we should be having this uploaded on our YouTube channel, so you can access it. Mr. Vijapuri wants to have your telephone number. Can you share it on
I'll
the
just
chat?
put it in the chat.
Yeah.
We can take the next question if you want.
Great, yeah. Shirish Rege, our past president from our club, wants to know if you book an air ticket or a hotel room or a car transfer on an e-commerce site abroad, but bookings are done by a firm in India using Indian credit card, do the new provisions cover it? How is it implemented?
So under the old act, there was a judgment of SpiceJet, and it since under the old act, e-commerce was an ambiguous concept. What the judgment said that wherever you accept the contract, that you book and wherever you do the booking, that place becomes relevant. So that is the place of acceptance of the contract. So wherever you are doing the booking, that becomes the jurisdiction. But under the new act, like we said, there is a groundbreaking provision that complaints can be filed even where the complainant resides. So the technicality of where to file the complaint, that is very much eased out, because we do not need to look at the cause of action aspect. We can simply be like, I reside wherever I reside, I can file the complaint over there. So regardless of what that is for credit card, online, abroad, India, regardless, you can file where the complainant resides and has address.
Okay. Thank you. I hope, Shirish, you are satisfied with the answer. Does the unfair contract apply to the unorganized sector of film industry, as most are unfair, one-sided? This is a question from Bhavnaji.
So you will have to see whether you are a consumer. Most of the contracts under film will most likely be a commercial contract. But if you can show that you are not a commercial, that it is for livelihood, I doubt it will be for self-employment. We can watch what kind of the judgments are passed, but mostly it will not be covered.
Okay.
They are not consumers.
Right.
And another defense that might be taken by the film industry, that if at all you are a consumer, it still becomes a contract of personal service, which is excluded from the act. That is another defense the film industry can take to not allow the consumer to apply.
Great.
Aslam
Okay.
bhai?
Somebody using an iPad is asking a question: is Gram Panchayat or Zilla Parishad under the purview of this act for services expected from them to an industry in D+ industrially backward zone?
It should be. If you can prove that you are a consumer, then even complaint can be filed against government authorities. Simply prove you are the consumer, what is the consideration paid and what is the deficiency in the service, then it should be maintainable.
Okay, there is another question from Shirish Rege. How is it implemented? He talked about the air bookings and all that. He said, how is it implemented?
So that implementation worries had to be worried about under the old act. Under the new act, regardless of, like I said, regardless of India, abroad, you can simply file wherever the complainant has address. So if you have booked and you reside in Mumbai, you can file your complaint in Mumbai if you have any kind of grievance. So that's what the groundbreaking provision of this act is, that the complaint can be filed within the territorial jurisdiction of the complainant. You reside in Mumbai, you can file in Mumbai. You reside in Kolkata, you can file in Kolkata, even if your flight tickets are not even related to Mumbai or Kolkata. It can be US to Hong Kong to whatever, and you can file in Mumbai simply because you have your address that the complainant resides in Mumbai. So there is nothing to worry about. You can simply file where you reside. All those technicalities had to be worried about under the old act. Now we need not worry about those technicalities. Simply go ahead and file in your own territorial jurisdiction, wherever the complainant resides. I hope that answers it.
Hopefully, yes. Thank you. A question for Hiralaji. How do we get invitation for webinars in future? Whom to contact? So Hiralaji, can you please share your mobile number so that everybody can note it and send you a WhatsApp message for future invitations? Yeah. Please share your mobile number on the chat, please.
Yes, let it be. I let.
Yeah, okay.
Aslam bhai, I would like to add something. Please give me
Yeah,
a
please,
minute.
please go ahead.
See, friends, Mithil has just now touched upon the commercial transactions not being covered, rightly so. However, in the old provisions as in the new provision, there is an explanation to the definition of consumer. The same definition was in 86 also, and it is in 2019 also. These are very important aspects, and therefore I'd like to point out specifically that explanation says that the expression commercial purpose does not include use by a person of goods bought and used by him exclusively for the purpose of earning his livelihood by means of self-employment. Here, this livelihood and self-employment will cover the artisan class. You know, they buy the products, including machineries and scissors and lot many other things. When those items come for defective, even though the same are used for self-employment purpose, livelihood purpose, those will be covered under the provisions of the present law also, as it was being covered under the repeal law. Thank you, friends.
Okay, one more question is there. What if the jurisdiction mentioned Mumbai and the person availing service is from Gujarat? Where can the consumer file the complaint?
Like I said, wherever the address, wherever is the location of the consumer, The act basically lays down 3 or 4 parameters to determine territorial jurisdiction, and the most convenient, there are 4 parameters that where the cause of action has arisen, where the address of the opposite party is there you can file. Where there are multiple opposite parties in the jurisdiction of anyone with the permission of the court, and the most convenient is the territorial jurisdiction of the complainant. So you can file even if it's in Gujarat, if you wherever is your wherever the complainant is working for grain or residing, that they can file in that area.
There's a request that whether a PDF can be made with images, so this can be widely circulated and many of us can be.
I will try, but in fact, I have consciously and deliberately avoided a PPT because I was like, first of all, it is from a layman point of view. If I make PPT, that somehow becomes technical, and also there was a slight time constraint. I thought that 45 minutes, if it's there, then PPT there will not be enough time. So I have
maybe later we can do it and we can put it on our website or something. Let's see.
Let me see if there is. I will definitely look into it.
Builder is asking to pay for NOC for flat. Since 10 years, he is not giving NOC, due to which society is not giving share certificate. Also, builder shows fake pending payment of previous owner. What's the remedy? Is it
so that will be covered by unfair contract and even the other causes of action like deficiency of service, restrictive trade practice, unfair trade practice. Action can be initiated against the builder.
Okay. Dispute arising in contracts between a parent company and its distributor can be filed here?
Most likely no, because one is commercial and number 2 is this becomes personal, sir.
Okay. A lot of comments about good clarifications, good talk, good presentation.
I appreciate it.
A lot of people want to be added for the future seminars. So
one question is coming, is housing societies covered and do the office bearers come? Yes.
Yeah.
If you can show that there is some kind of deficiency. So for example, if the society is not allotting you parking, you can approach. If they are not following the laws of parking, you can approach the consumer courts against the society. Recently, the consumer courts in January 2020 have also held that where membership was not given by society to a person who had applied, he had approached and he had got relief. So yes, you can file against the society. Just prove that what is the deficiency in service.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is all the questions we have.
Someone is asking, where am I based? I'm based in Mumbai. Ghatkopar is our office and Mumbai is primarily our branch.
Can you clear how much a person can extend the safety door?
I did not understand that question. If the kind person can kindly elaborate on that.
Yeah, Hiralji, I think we have run out of the questions now.
Yeah.
So one more question has come, the last one. Raji Saxena is asking, can a complaint be filed against a society member for lapse in security which had left to the theft?
That seems to be more of a matter where we will have to look at the facts of the case. Is there actually any wrongdoing or negligence by the society, or is it merely unfortunate? If we have tried to ensure that we have repeatedly written letters to the society asking them to hire better security, if we have told them that we have had past incidences, and if there is anything that the society has not done, then yes. But we will have to look at the facts of the case, whether there is any wrongdoing by the society, if there is any negligence by the society.
Advocate Anish Palkar is asking, like the safety door is causing trouble to the other next door. So it's, I think, a dispute among
so
the
in
neighbors.
This, I doubt it will go, because at the max, what can the society do? What practically it might come down to, that society will also take your side. Society will also write a letter to that person saying, you please don't do what this gentleman is asking you. But what is the question of enforceability? Where is the wrongdoing by the society? And even if society is on your side, if society is on your side, you cannot approach the consumer, because where is the wrongdoing by the society? and that grievance is better vented at the cooperative level, at the cooperative court or at the registrar. Consumer, I doubt, will entertain that grievance against the society, because from what I foresee, society cannot do much in this.
CA Kirit Dave
If
is
there is
asking.
unauthorized construction, it can look into that. But if everything is complied with and according to the norm, then consumer may not be willing to entertain that complaint, and your grievance is better at the cooperative.
CH Kirit Dave wants to know if the committee increases parking charges exorbitantly from say 250 rupees a month to 10,000 rupees per month per vehicle.
Yes, yes. According to me, that can be litigated. That is very unreasonable and arbitrary. That will come under unfair and restrictive treatment.
Okay. Water leakage from upper floor flat and society not coming to the rescue.
Yes, we can find. If society is literally refusing to act and not doing repairs, yes, then we can find.
Okay, so I think we have as many questions as we could answer. Thank you very much, Mithilji, for the lovely presentation. From the comments that I'm getting from all the participants, I think it has been a very, very useful Sunday morning spent with you. And thanks once again. Thank you, Ramesh Prabhuji. Thank you, Hiralji, and thank you, Anand Gupta, for your participation in this excellent seminar. We hope to continue this monthly series of seminars with Maharashtra Society Welfare Association, and we look forward to active participation from all of you. Thank you once again, and have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.